The National Desk, America's News Now.
Severe weather strikes again from Texas to Virginia. Multi-day storms threatening millions in areas still reeling after being hit last week.
We want to see tensions de-escalated. We don't want to see a war with Iran, and we certainly aren't looking for a wider conflict in the region.
The world waits as Israel promises to hit back at Iran's retaliatory strike over the weekend. And home explosions across the country captured headlines in 2023. What we now know that could help combat the dangerous and deadly hazard. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. We begin tonight with the threat of severe weather impacting more than 70 million Americans in a multi-day event. Tonight, we are tracking a damaging line of storms developing across the Midwest and Great Plains that could bring large hail, damaging wind gusts, and the possibility for tornadoes. Those storm threats expected to span from the Midwest all the way to the East Coast. We're tracking the strongest storms in areas from Des Moines, Iowa to Columbia, Missouri on Tuesday afternoon. A severe thunderstorm watch has also been issued in parts of Maryland, Virginia, and West Virginia. By Wednesday, we'll see scattered storms hit the Ohio Valley and Mid-South. Meantime, in Colorado, winter storm watches issued through Tuesday. Rain and snow showers will transition to moderate snow in the overnight hours. Wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour possible, making travel difficult. Plus, over a foot of snow expected in portions of the state's northern and western mountains. In an unprecedented first that will soon be repeated in other states, a former president was in court today for the jury selection of a criminal trial against them. Donald Trump was in attendance in New York as about 500 possible jurors are being considered for the groundbreaking case. More than half of the first 96 potential jurors admitted that they could not be impartial, and they were quickly dismissed. Before jury selection even started, prosecutors asked the judge to fine Donald Trump $3,000 because they say he violated the judge's gag orders. Judge Merchan did not rule on the motion and said they will hold a hearing on Tuesday, April 23rd. The FBI is conducting a criminal investigation into the Baltimore bridge collapse that killed 6 people. Federal agents have been aboard the massive cargo ship Dolly that hit the Francis Scott Key Bridge on March 26th. The probe is focused on the lead up to the collision and whether all federal laws were followed. Baltimore is also partnering with 2 firms to make sure everyone is held legally accountable. Meanwhile, attorneys representing the victims and their families are slamming a 173-year-old law that serves as a legal shield for the container ship's owner.
This was all preventable. That is why we've been brought in to investigate and find out what has happened and give these families a voice. Because the thing that's getting lost right now is the voice of the victims. These people's lives mattered.
They claim the Limitation of Liability Act of 1851 is denying the families of making legal claims against Grace Ocean. They want Congress to repeal the law. The Israeli War Cabinet met today, and it is believed that their response to Iran's missile attack over the weekend may be imminent. While it is unclear how extensive that response will be, the United States is urging Israel to show restraint. National correspondent Matt Gelka has the latest.
Before I begin, I want to discuss some of the events that took place in the Middle East.
The president meeting with the prime minister of Iraq in the wake of Iran's attack on Israel. It was a partnership he called pivotal as the tensions in the Middle East are at a boiling point. The White House continues to urge Israel not to escalate the war.
We have been coordinating a diplomatic response to seek to prevent escalation. Strength and wisdom need to be the different sides of the same coin.
More than 300 drones and missiles were fired at Israel, with most of the weapons intercepted by Israeli defense forces, along with allies, including the U.S. But the president reportedly told Israel over the weekend that America would not support any offensive efforts against Iran. The president's critics say the policy is weak.
They're crystal clear with our allies, with America's allies. We will not have your back in this situation. That's what leads to the weakness.
Congress will also look to respond. 17 bills are teed up for the House floor this week, either condemning Iran or showing support for Israel. The biggest question is still about aid. Democrats in the White House push for the House to take up a defense bill that includes money for Israel along with Ukraine and Taiwan. House Speaker Mike Johnson said his chamber is still working out the details.
The House Republicans and the Republican Party understand the necessity of standing with Israel. We are going to try again this week, and the details of that package are being put together right now. We're looking at the options and all these supplemental issues.
Tying Israel aid to Ukraine aid has become a very divisive issue on Capitol Hill, and it's at least one of the reasons that Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene says she might force a vote to oust Speaker Mike Johnson. But Johnson said there's a consensus in making some of that Ukraine money a loan, an idea supported by former President Donald Trump, and it could be the quickest way to get money to Israel. For the National Desk in Washington, I'm Matt Gelka.
And Israel was set to take its first steps toward a ground offensive in Rafah this week, but has delayed those plans as it mulls over a response to Iran. That's according to two Israeli sources who spoke to CNN. The IDF was set to begin dropping leaflets on parts of Rafah today to begin preparations for moving out broad swaths of people as it looks to dismantle Hamas. But it's a move that's been criticized globally as more than 1 million displaced Gazans are currently seeking refuge there. An offensive would put more innocent civilians at risk and threaten to deepen an already existing hunger crisis. Israel says it remains determined to carry out a ground offensive in the city. And on tax day, a nationwide strike from demonstrators who are against sending U.S. taxpayer money to Israel in support of its war efforts in Gaza. In San Francisco, ceasefire advocates blocked both sides of the Golden Gate Bridge for 5 hours today to call attention to hostilities abroad and why the U.S. should not be funding the war. Also, in Chicago, more of the same. We saw protesters block access to a road at O'Hare International Airport. And here in Washington, D.C., organizers shut down the Lockheed Martin building today, demanding the U.S. military contractor stop arming and supplying weapons to Israel. Other protests took place in various other cities, including New York, Philadelphia, and Miami. And live to Capitol Hill right now, where lawmakers in the House are meeting to talk about advancing wartime aid to Israel, along with Ukraine and Taiwan. A day after Iran's counterattack, nearly 100 House Democrats and Republicans have implored Speaker Mike Johnson to bring it to the floor, signaling it may get the bipartisan support it needs to move forward. The Senate has already passed a foreign aid package which pegs $14 billion for Israel. Idaho can enforce its ban on gender transitioning care for transgender minors as lawsuits continue. The Supreme Court just made that decision today, reversing lower courts' decisions. Doctors there can now be imprisoned if they give hormones, puberty blockers, or other related treatments to youth. The Supreme Court also decided not to take up a case that could protect organizers of protests from an illegal action of people in that assembly if those actions are a predictable outcome. In 2019, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that a BLM protest organizer, DeRay McKesson, could be held liable for an injury to an unnamed Louisiana police officer who was assaulted during that event. Critics believe this ruling reduces First Amendment protections. An investigation underway right now into a mass shooting outside of a New Orleans nightclub happened last night. 7 women, 5 men shot. One of the women, we understand, has died. Police still working to identify any possible suspects, and they're asking anyone with information to call police. Last night in Onondaga County, New York, a police officer and a sheriff's deputy were killed after attempting to make a traffic stop on a suspicious vehicle. The 2 officers tracked the vehicle to a home in Liverpool. While investigating the car, an individual fired upon them from the house. The suspect, identified as Christopher Murphy, is also dead. At least 40 law enforcement officers have now been killed in the line of duty across the country just this year alone in 2024. The Colorado State Legislature has moved closer to banning the new sale or transfer of any semi-automatic rifles. In a 35-27 vote, the democratically controlled House has now sent the measure to the Colorado Senate. The legislation wouldn't outlaw the weapons for those who currently own them. Democrats hold a 9-vote advantage in the Senate. Critics to the legislation have promised to sue on Second Amendment grounds if the restriction becomes law. And we now know Kansas women Veronica Butler and Jillian Kelly were killed over a custody disagreement. That's according to authorities. The women were driving to pick up Butler's kids when they went missing back on March 30th. Authorities said today the children's grandmother, along with 3 people who call themselves God's misfits, are facing murder and kidnapping charges. The suspects are set to appear in court on Wednesday. A California women's prison known as the Rape Club is shutting down because of widespread sexual abuse. The Bureau of Prisons said today it is planning to close FCI Dublin after failing to resolve several issues. At least 8 employees have been charged with abusing inmates since 2021. Advocates say the prison also has mold and asbestos issues. The women will be transferred to other facilities. Coming up, a lingering effect of the pandemic could threaten a key pillar of the United States economy. A look at the pressure building on commercial real estate. Then a new poll shows how well Americans are sleeping and whether that's improving or getting worse. And later, why there have been so many deadly home explosions recently and whether you should be worried about your own home. We're back in 90 seconds. Americans are still spending despite high inflation and interest rates. The Commerce Department says retail sales increased for a second month in a row last month. They went up 0.7%, higher than economists had expected. This highlights the strength of American consumers, driven by a strong job market. But part of this economic resiliency is having an effect on commercial real estate. One of the perks remaining from the pandemic era is the ability to work from home, but it's leaving massive amounts of office space vacant. And some economists say it's only a matter of time before that sends ripples throughout the broader economy. National correspondent Atrel Nashar explains the risk.
Trading in fluorescent office lights for the comfort of home, by 2025, 1 in 5 Americans is expected to work remotely. It's a trend that's terrifying the commercial real estate market and the banks that finance office buildings that have emptied out.
Commercial real estate is a slow burn. It's a classic burn, and so there'll be difficulties, and we're working at.
Declining office property values and high interest rates spelled trouble. Economists at the National Bureau of Economic Research say 44% of office loans are for properties now worth less than their outstanding debt.
When interest rates go up 300 basis points, whatever you own with their cash flow is worth 30% less.
Large firms like Bank of America and JP Chase are in a much better position to navigate the risk than regional banks like New York Community Bank Corp. Top rating firm Moody's downgraded the bank to junk status earlier this year, in part because around 54% of its office loans are in Manhattan, where office vacancy is around 15%. According to the Mortgage Bankers Association, more than $1 trillion in commercial real estate loans in the U.S. will come due in the next 2 years. The International Monetary Fund says a spike in delinquencies and defaults could trigger negative spillovers to the rest of the economy. The Federal Reserve is keeping close watch.
We've looked at banks that have significant concentrations, and we've been in touch with them to make sure that they have a plan to deal with that. There will be losses by some banks.
With the U.S. having the largest commercial property market in the world, the Fed believes this is a problem that will haunt the nation's financial system for years. In Washington, I'm Atrel Najar for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Atra, thank you. Samsung is most likely getting up to $6.4 billion in federal grants to expand chip production in the Austin area. President Biden announced a preliminary deal today, saying it will create more than 20,000 jobs and strengthen national security. Tech experts say boosting domestic chip development will make the supply chain more reliable. Tesla shares are down almost 6% after Elon Musk announced the company will be laying off over 10% of its workforce. EV sales growing has been declining, especially for Tesla, and the company is facing more and more competition. In a memo to employees, Musk said he's trying to reduce costs and increase productivity before entering the next phase of growth. Rust armorer Hannah Gutierrez is set to spend 18 months behind bars, the maximum penalty she could have received. This, of course, for that fatal shooting on set of cinematographer Helena Hutchins. Gutierrez's attorney had requested probation for her due to her youth and lack of criminal history. But prosecutors pushed for the maximum sentence because of what they said was extreme recklessness. Alec Baldwin, the actor who held the gun when it fired and the executive producer of the movie, will be tried for manslaughter beginning on July 9th. Most Americans say they could use more sleep. That's according to a new Gallup poll. That's not surprising. It finds that at least 57% of adults say they would feel better if they got more sleep, while 42% said that they're sleeping as much as they need. That's a reversal from 2013, when 56% said they got as much sleep as they needed. The poll also finds women under the age of 50 are least likely to report sleeping enough. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We're taking the pulse of America.
A standout teammate at both Lipscomb Academy and for the TSU Tigers, Chazon Page's place on the field and in the hearts of those who loved him will never be replaced, according to his father, Rico.
C. Page. His nickname. All the football players call him C. Page.
Metro Police say Chazon Page was walking his girlfriend and some other friends to their car early Sunday morning, crossing Gallatin Pike near Marion Avenue. That's when his girlfriend says a dark red car, a sedan, or possibly a smaller SUV sped near them.
A car was going probably 100 miles an hour down the street.
She says Chazon sacrificed his life to save hers.
On March 22nd, a Hayes CISD school bus was driving back from an afternoon field trip when a concrete pump truck veered into the wrong lane and crashed into the bus, causing it to roll over. 5-year-old Ulysses Rodriguez Montoya and a driver behind the bus, 33-year-old Ryan Wallace, were killed in the crash. The school bus was not equipped with seat belts. In light of the tragedy, ACISD is hosting a special meeting Monday afternoon to outline a 5-part plan to ensure every single bus in the district is equipped with seat belts.
A new mobile app called Safer is rolling out with the goal of making it easier to report hate crimes. It was just launched by the Center for Freedom and Safety. They say it's a first-of-its-kind app allowing users to submit evidence of hate crimes, which will be evaluated by trained analysts who have a direct line to law enforcement.
It's merely a tool that combines human technology intelligence, also crowdsourced information to amplify the voices of those that have been silenced for too long. The goal of this resource is to serve as a bridge between the community at large, legislative entities, as well as law enforcement in a way that enables individuals to report hate crimes quickly.
Law enforcement officials say the app can be used anywhere, although they're planning a targeted rollout first in Los Angeles. Coming up, 2023 was the deadliest year for home explosions in nearly 20 years. If you have gas in your home, we'll show you what you can do to protect yourself. Home explosions rocked neighborhoods from coast to coast in 2023, and our Spotlight on America team has learned it was the deadliest year for these catastrophic blasts in nearly 2 decades. Investigative correspondent Angie Moreski has been tracking home explosions nationwide for months and takes a closer look at what's causing them and whether you should be worried about your home.
This catastrophic home explosion captured on doorbell video was the deadliest nationwide in 2023, killing 6 people in the suburban neighborhood of Rustic Ridge, just east of Pittsburgh. These are just some of the sudden, devastating explosions that made 2023 the deadliest year since 2004 for gas-fed explosions, with 23 fatalities, more than 4 times higher than the year before. Rich Meyer is a fire explosion investigator.
How often is it natural gas pipelines involved?
Probably half or more.
Aging infrastructure, old corroded gas pipelines are more likely to crack and leak, increasing the risk, he says, of gas migrating underground into people's homes and causing explosions.
There are lines that have been in place for over 100 years, and they are breaking.
Besides aging infrastructure, other significant issues that can cause leaks that lead to explosions include construction work, where pipes can be damaged during digging, and malfunctioning equipment. Malfunctioning equipment was the cause of a massive deadly explosion in 2016 in Silver Spring, Maryland at the Flower Branch Apartments. 5 adults and 2 children died.
Sometimes when I come out, I think I can smell it.
Isidro Vargas will never forget the terror of that night.
I saw people jumping from the building. It's been terrible, I can tell you.
Investigators concluded a malfunctioning mercury regulator on a gas meter caused the deadly blast. And human error caused a massive explosion here just a few miles away in 2022 at the Friendly Garden Apartments, also in Silver Spring. A maintenance worker doing repairs accidentally cut a gas line instead of a water line.
That one.
Alex Jacquois lives at Friendly Garden.
Boom. And then when I look out through the window, and then I saw the flame.
The National Transportation Safety Board investigates major explosions that lead to fatalities, significant injury, and property loss. But not all explosions are required to be reported to the federal government, making it harder to determine patterns across the country.
What would the benefit of having a comprehensive database be?
The more information you have, the better armed you are when it comes to fixing the problem.
If you use gas in your home, one way to protect yourself is to get an in-home gas detector. I got this one on Amazon for $20. All you do is plug it into the wall near a gas appliance. Then, if gas builds up, an alarm sounds warning you to get out. A small investment to potentially save lives. For Spotlight on America, I'm Angie Moreski.
Angie, thank you. And coming up, women's basketball is in the spotlight again tonight. Who will be at the WNBA draft and which team gets the first pick? We'll tell you right after this. Coming off a historic women's basketball NCAA tournament that gained record-breaking audiences, women's basketball takes the stage again tonight with the WNBA draft in New York City. There are 15 prospects who are expected to attend the event at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, along with Caitlin Clark, the presumptive first pick. Other headliners include Angel Reese, Rakea Jackson, Cameron Brink, and the 2024 national champion Camila Cardozo. The #1 pick goes to the Indiana Fever. Tonight's draft airs live on ESPN at 7:30 p.m. and that's Eastern Time. That does it for this edition of the National Desk. We do invite you to join us again this evening for more coverage of America's top stories. Just check your local listings. I'm Amira David. Thank you so much for watching.